Welcome to the United Way Difference, a program that discusses Oshkosh community needs and how local nonprofit agencies are supporting people in our area. United Way's focus in the areas of income, education, health, and volunteerism helps to build a stronger, more caring, and compassionate community. The United Way Difference is brought to you by the Oshkosh Area United Way.
Hi, and welcome to United Way Difference. I'm Sue Ponick with the United Way, and today we're going to be talking about a program that is really a great collaboration in this community. And my guests, I'm not going to tell you what it is because they're going to tell you, but my guests are Al Rolfe, and Al is a social worker for Salvation Army, and Karen Beefus is the project manager for a program called Hub. The Hub. So welcome to the program. This is going to be exciting, and hopefully people will be as excited about it as we are. So Karen, I'm going to start with you. Tell me, what is the purpose of the Hub?
The Hub is to help people reach self-sufficiency. So our goal is to help people get ahead and stay ahead instead of always falling into a financial crisis and being put backwards, giving them the opportunity to become self-sufficient, have a stable and set household, and they don't have to worry about those surprises that come up that can set them backwards.
Those unintended events.
Correct.
That maybe set them back. Mm-hmm. Okay. I noticed that on the slide presentation that we have the Hub, bringing a community together is our vision. And then maybe you want to finish the rest of that.
Sure. The mission is to help households overcome financial emergencies and achieve lasting self-sufficiency.
Okay, and how are we going to do that?
Well, the goal there is to, right now, the way people would have to go and seek services is they have to go to each agency individually, tell their story, see if they qualify. Well, what the Hub does is they bring them together, and instead of that person having to go to this silo and this silo and this silo, that Hub volunteer and coach is very aware and familiar with the resources that the community has. So in hearing their story, they can assess what resources they would already qualify for, and they make that warm handoff. And what I mean by that is if you are working at 1.5 jobs and you have 3 kids that you're running all around, and then you sit down and you have a meeting with someone and they give you a card and say, well, call these people and make an appointment, they can help you. Then you walk out and your phone is ringing and it's the babysitter and she's sick or whatever, and then whoever you were supposed to call is now not a priority. That coach is going to call, they're going to share your story with the person they're contacting. They're going to know if you're eligible or not, and then that appointment is going to be set. So when you leave there, you already know when your appointment will be. That person that you're going to meet with knows why you're coming, so you don't have to retell your story again, and it's on your calendar. So you don't have to go that extra step of making that appointment. They've already contacted you. And a big part of the drop-off that happens is when people do walk off, life happens and it gets put on the back burner. I mean, even if we're not facing crises after crises, that happens. So it's just giving them that warm connection to make sure that they're already set to go and meet with someone about a service that they may need.
Okay, so we talk about a community without Hub, that there are barriers to entry. Al, what are you saying when you meet with people? What are their barriers?
Well, a lot of the barriers are very simple. They have a specific need. For example, we have a food pantry. So some people will come in, that's their specific need, it's met right away, and then we don't see them again. Okay. Others are more complex. And so some of the barriers they run into are housing, transportation, childcare, lack of employment skills, education.
Or I should say lack of education.
Lack of education, exactly. And so no one agency has all of the resources sometimes to be able to help these more complex families. And so I see an advantage with the Hub because we're able to connect people with the right resources, and it is more of a collaboration versus, as you were saying, Karen, these silo approaches.
Okay. So in this, the example that Karen used, she said that if somebody were to come into your office and they needed, let's say, to have a referral to another agency, maybe they were having trouble with budget counseling, so you're going to refer them maybe to FISC. So instead of just saying, here's Mary's or Terry's information or Connie's information, here is you wouldn't just give them a card, you would work with them to set up that appointment.
Absolutely, yes. And we would try to coordinate the services as much as we could, so we're not duplicating and that we're also addressing gaps so that it's a very seamless process.
Okay, and you talked about seamless, and so the next bullet point on this slide talks about disjointed experience. So is that for the provider or for the participant?
That would be for the participant. You know, when you're going to one place, you can tell a different story each place. And so by having a hub coach and having that consistent story told, when they go someplace, they know whether or not that they're qualified already. So that disjointed and going to the wrong door is eliminated.
Okay, you had mentioned, and it's, I think maybe this goes into the systems, well, maybe not yet, systems change this would go into. Who is that hub coach and what do they do?
Well, hub coaches
Just
are
briefly,
wonderful
because I know
people
we're going
like
to talk a little
Al.
bit. Okay.
And what a hub coach does is they meet with a person, they talk to them and learn what barriers they may be facing, what are the challenges, and what are your goals. And then they'll sit down and help them create SMART goals and action plans with a definable plan, and then create and connect them with the people who will help them overcome those barriers or help them get that education. And some of it is just being that support that a lot of people lack, that person in their corner saying, you got this.
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting because I think, and maybe this is because of the time that I grew up, but as I was growing up, if there was somebody, there seemed to always be somebody that was in your corner because you either had, you know, your parents or a brother or sister or other family members who might be able to step in. And, you know, when I grew up in a small town, so neighbors also looked out for you. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you didn't want them looking out for you, but they did anyway. But, you know, people looked out for one another. And I think because our society has become so transient in many cases, families don't live together, at least maybe even within a 25-mile radius of each other, to be able to provide that support. So they need to get that support from someplace. And then the last thing on this slide was about systems challenges. So what are the systems challenges? I mistakenly read that originally, systems change, and it's challenges.
It is challenges. For example, agencies have certain criteria that they have to follow. So when they go there, they are limited on what they can do there and change. So it might make sense to an agency to fluctuate from what their perimeters are, but they can't. So that's where having a coach or other people be able to come up with different things. But changing systems is hard. So we all know that we can be more, well, maybe we don't all know, but by working together, we identify ways that we can become more efficient, but that does mean changing those systems. And changing a system doesn't mean just having one agency change the way they're doing things. It has a domino effect. Mm-hmm. And so change is hard, not just for the people who are dealing with it or in it, but it's also the dynamic of the agency itself that has to change.
Okay. Well, and I love this slide because it really talks about before we had the hub and now after the hub. And I know that maybe we're not 100% to the after yet,
but we're on our way.
Mm-hmm. So Al, maybe you want to talk about this slide and what it was like before, and maybe just point out a couple of things.
Well, I think for us, and I'm fairly new to the Salvation Army, I've been there about 2 years, so it was learning the different community resources and what some of the criteria are for service provision. And through the hub, not only through do we have a shared database, which is helpful, we're all kind of speaking the same language, so to speak, we also have meetings where coaching sites can come together and partners can come together that deal with the population that lives in poverty to do some brainstorming, to learn about different programs that might be out there, to learn about new programs that might be starting.
I know that you're doing some joint educational things to learn more about resources. You did an event over at the Oshkosh Community Pantry, a resource fair.
Correct. And what we did there is we brought all the partners together. So one of the things that was identified is although we had all these partners and they know about each other, they really didn't know what each other did or what other services were available. So
the fair was for partners to learn about each other.
Correct.
Okay.
It was to bring them together put faces with names and identify the faces to the names to the agency and be able to share stories and situations. If I have this client that may have X problem or issue, and finding out different resources that were available. Because the participants were able to meet with those agencies while they were there as well, but the main focus of the resource fair was so that all of the partners had the opportunity to come together and meet and share what their missions were.
So then, if we want to see, you mentioned two things. One was educating the providers, but also the increased communication or the lack of communication maybe prior to the hub, and now how that has been increased as one of the after, what we were hoping to achieve after. And then, Al, you also mentioned the database. So how does that work, and do we share information about everybody to everybody?
No, what happens
I want to know, is my information out there?
No, it's not. What we do is we kind of explain the hub and the advantages if clients do come in with multiple needs, that they'll need services from different agencies. So with their written permission, we are able to use a common intake form, and then that information can be sent to the agencies that the client requires service from. So it isn't accessible by everybody that has access to it. It's very specific to the agencies that the clients will be meeting with.
And you said that the participant needs to give permission.
Absolutely. Yep,
Okay.
It's written permission. And that way, as Karen was saying, if somebody needed a service from an agency and I was the person that did the intake, I can send their intake information to the agency that that has the service the clients need.
Okay.
So as Karen said, they're not repeating their story, and it's, I think, more holistic, because if they do have multiple needs with multiple agencies, they'll go to one agency, as Karen was saying, maybe tell just a little bit of their story because they think that's the agency that has that need.
Okay.
This way, it's much more holistic and, as I said, a seamless approach. So we're not just addressing individual crises, so to speak. We're really looking at the big picture. What are the needs? What are also the strengths that the participant has that they're bringing to the table?
And that kind of goes to this next slide of the way that we're going to be able to achieve our vision. Is I look at the first person on the left here, who's they come in, they may not know where to go, so they come to the wrong agency for the wrong thing, but they're steered in the right direction, or they're worked with by that agency, and then those services come together. So maybe you guys could talk a little bit about this slide and how this would all work.
Well, on the community approach, we have multiple access points. So with 26 partners, a participant could present at any agency and be referred to the hub. So that way they're going right to the nucleus of the collaboration, and that person will be put in touch with someone who will be able to help them. The long-term relationships come in that our coaches don't have a set time limit to work with a person. Some people may come in, it might take 30 days, and they're like, yep, I'm good. Thank you for your help, I'm gone. But someone else may need 2-3 years to be worked with because they have bigger issues or more complex situation to overcome, or they have longer term goals. And this way they're working with the same person throughout that entire time frame and really have that support and relationship to meet those goals and stay on track.
And so how does the bundling of services work quickly?
Bundling of services is working with that coach and working with two or more agencies together. And the NKC Foundation has found that 66% people are more successful when you are bundling services.
Okay, and that coach is the person who's bringing this all together.
Correct.
Okay, well, we need to take a quick break. So we're going to come back after about a minute. I hope you'll stay tuned and finish our story with Karen and Ralph and Al. I did it. And Al, to talk about the rest of the hub and that initiative, that collaboration that we're working on in our community. Thank you.
It's not a charity. It's more than a charity. It's about helping people we live with. It's about being the type of person that the 6-year-old version of ourselves wanted us to be. It's about community and looking out for one another. It's about money, yes, but it's so much more than money. It's about friendship and common values. It's about opening doors when others are slammed shut. It's about giving kids a place to be kids and growing up knowing they live in a community that cares about them. It's about making sure that everyone gets to see the dentist, because we want to make sure that they have every last tooth in those smiles. Ultimately, that's it. It's about the smiles, old smiles and new smiles. It's about us, all of us, our community living united, because great things happen when we live united. Will you join us?
Hi, and welcome back to the United Way Difference. My guests today are Karen Beefus. Karen is the project manager for the Hub, and Al Ralph is a social worker with Salvation Army, who is one of the participating agencies with the Hub. So welcome back to the program. Before we left, we were talking about the different partners that are in the program, and we have the slide that will talk about the partners. And Karen, maybe you could focus on the partnership and how that works.
Sure. We have currently 26 partners within the Hub collaboration. There are principal partners and there's associate partners. Now within the principal partners, they are the ones that are the steering force and also sit on the steering committee. They take responsibility for the program, the development of it, the changes, the implementation. They're the heart and soul of the Hub, making sure that it follows its mission. We have 2 backbone agencies. One, our fiscal agent, is the Oshkosh Area United Way, and then AdvoCap is our second backbone agency. And AdvoCap was also the pilot site for the coaching program with their PASS program, which is
People Achieving Self-Sufficiency.
Thank you. Now, and then we have associate partners, and the associate partners come on board, and they also are, they're typically service providers, and they agree to use our database, because sharing of the data and making it available to those that have the release of information to access it is one of the major foundations of the Hub, collecting that data. So we have the principal and associate partners, and as they go out and put the information into the database and refer and connect people, that is where we're able to measure our outcomes. And that's very important, because one of the things funders want to see, as well as the community, is what is the impact Hub is having. And by these 26 partners inputting data into the Apricot data system that we utilize, it allows us to go back and say, this is the difference bundling of services is making.
Okay, and one of the things on the slide that we have up right now is I think the importance of all partners agreeing with the vision and the mission and then the outcomes. Which would be very, very important, as well as making sure that everyone is entering the data into the database. So Al, maybe I need to ask you this question, because you're actively a coach. How does coaching work?
Well, what we do is we meet with primarily families and individuals that come to our door that have a need. We explain what coaching is and what the advantages of it are. And then if clients are interested, we would then enroll them in the Hub. And it involves doing an assessment, which I'll talk a little bit more about, one of the tools that we use.
Okay.
So what we're trying to find out are what are the, where would the client like to be, 6 months, a year, whatever it is up the road. What would things look like if they were self-sufficient?
Yeah, I'm just going to interrupt for a second, because
Certainly.
we have a lovely slide that shows the coaches that we have already at the 3 different organizations. We have Jackie and Lori over at AdvoCap, and Jordan as well. And then Hope is over at the Oshkosh Area Community Pantry, and then there's you and Lisa over
Yes.
at Salvation Army.
Yes.
So it's a really great team.
Absolutely.
And in a minute, I'm going to have you talk about how you all work together.
Sure.
Okay.
So once we know what the clients, what they would like their lives to look like up the road, then we would establish SMART goals. And those are goals that are specific, they're able to be measured, they have to be attainable and realistic to the client's system, and then time limited. So we set these goals to try to move the client toward what they'd like their future to look like. And then we also look at what strengths do they bring to the table that are going to help them get there, and then what are the barriers that they have to overcome in order to get there.
Okay.
And so once we have those goals set in place, then we look at what are some of the resources in the community that are going to assist people to overcome barriers and meet their goals. And those then are periodically evaluated to see, are we making progress? If so, it looks like we're on the right track. If we aren't, what might we need to do differently in order to move forward and see progress being made?
Okay. Karen, the slide that we're showing here, this inverted triangle, what are we talking about? I mean, I know it's related to coaching.
Correct. It's the coordination of actions. So, typically someone may come in and present, but they're in an emergency situation. A friend of mine uses the example that her husband had a heart attack and he goes to the emergency room. Well, when you're in the emergency room, you're being taken care of, and they're finding a remedy to that. They're stabilizing you. But once you leave the hospital, then you go to your primary care physician, and that primary care physician is coordinating your health plan with the cardiologist, with the nutritionist, and so forth. So when you relate that to hub coaching, that preferred care provider is actually the hub coach.
Okay.
And they are helping connect you with those people that are on that path. And one of the things with participants in hub coaching is it's all participant driven. It's all voluntary. There's no carrot at the end of it that says you have to participate with hub coaching in order to do this. This is people who are really motivated and want to make that change in their life. So as the coach becomes that primary care physician, then the next measure there is to measure the outcomes and track gaps. And the hub coaches have identified about 4 or 5 really important gaps in the community that we have to take a look at as well.
Okay. One of the things that you said I found interesting was that in the current, maybe a little bit before now, but how it worked before is people came in for a specific episode. And that episode was taken care of. And so I might come in and talk with you, Al, and I might need rent assistance. And you say, okay, these are the things we can do to help you with, so that you don't lose your apartment or your house. And then I'm gone. And then I might not see you again until my next episode. So it was that real short-term relationship. But now you're talking about, okay, Sue, I see you have this issue with rent. Now, what other things are you facing? And having that dialogue and finding out more about me, so that you can take that holistic approach.
Absolutely.
And if you remember one of the back slides, it talked about that longer-term relationship with the coach. So how do we get people to identify where they're at?
Well, what we use, we have a self-sufficiency matrix that's based on national models, and it has 21 different dimensions.
And everyone uses that in this program?
Yes.
Okay.
That's one of the common intake forms that we do use. And they're ranked on a scale from 1 to 5. So 1 means they're kind of in crisis, or they may not have any of that particular dimension. 5 means that they're empowered, they're thriving. So what we do is we, through interviews and getting to know the participants, we're able with them to figure out where on this matrix they would be with these 21 dimensions.
And it's a couple of the dimensions, I'll just read them because they're kind of small on the screen, would be income or credit history, their employment status, their workplace skills. Another one might be family relationships, childcare, parenting skills, maybe some legal issues. Okay.
Absolutely. And so it is a very, I think, kind of all-encompassing as far as some of the needs that people might present with. If they're scoring toward the higher end, those are strengths that the family has. In other words, they may not have a need for childcare, or they may not, transportation, for example, may not be a barrier. So they're going to rank higher on the matrix, which means those are strengths that the clients have. And as when we start looking at the ones that are lower scoring, then we really try to pick out maybe 3 to 5 of those dimensions to start with, so it's not overwhelming. And we do try to find dimensions that we believe we are going to see some movement fairly quickly to empower the client, to give them self-confidence that, hey, I can do this.
So let's say I come in and say, my employment stinks. I want to do something better. I want to be a welder. But maybe I haven't finished high school.
Okay, yeah.
So employment maybe wouldn't be the top thing on the matrix. I mean, ultimately that's my goal. But how would you work me through that?
What we would look at then, for example, in your scenario, education would be a barrier. So we would try to figure out through different resources, and again, this is where this is very nice. We don't at Salvation Army have an HSED program per se. So we can refer them directly to an agency that could help them. So we do try to figure out what the barriers are, and if we overcome one, is it going to open doors and kind of eliminate others?
Okay. And then we talked about the goal setting, and then we also talked about assessing the progress. So how do you assess progress on the matrix? Do you periodically review the matrix with the participant?
We do periodically review it at a minimum every 3 months. And as I said, we're hoping to be able to see progress. If we are seeing movement on the matrix, it means we're doing something right. We're headed in the right direction. If we're not seeing movement, then it might mean that we have to adjust our goals or some of the resources accordingly.
Okay. Karen, one of the things that we might need is how can people help? I mean, I know that one of the systems changes is to be able to build this up to capacity to handle more people. So how are we doing that? Are all the coaches employed?
Not all of the coaches. We have paid staff working as coaches at each of the 3 volunteer sites, but we also have 6 volunteer advocates on board now. And what the volunteer advocates are, there are volunteer coaches. They are meant to help us increase our capacity, because a coach is not a social worker or a case manager. They are there to be the connector to those resources. So we currently have 3 volunteers at Advocap, 2 at Salvation Army, and then 1 at the Oshkosh Area Community Pantry. So our needs in order to make to see that hub is sustainable and successful here in the Oshkosh community is we do have a need for volunteer coaches. And
if somebody's interested, how would they go about doing that?
If you go to huboshkosh.org, become a volunteer, and click on there, there's an application. You can also email info@huboshkosh.org, and I can forward that information to you. So volunteers, also sustainability. We're
Financial stability.
Financial stability. And there was one other one.
It will come to you.
It will come to me.
Al, in the minute that we have, less than a minute, do you have a success story that you can quickly share?
Sure.
Most important one.
I had a lady that kind of in the middle of the night fled a domestic violence situation. She came to a shelter here, started working with me through coaching and case management. She is now going to school for nursing and has her own housing.
Wow.
She has her own transportation, and her children are connected with resources in the community. And so she does come in for 3-month follow-ups now just to see how things are going. But just the progress she made from being homeless, unemployed, to being in school for nursing. She does in-home health care right now.
And how long did that take?
A little under a year.
Wow, that's amazing.
But one of the most important things there also is that you have 5 children now looking at their mother who was able to change their life like this and really impact what could be generational poverty.
Okay. Karen, you said that there was one that you had forgotten. Did you remember what it was?
I did. It's refer. If you know someone who's in that cycle, living paycheck to paycheck, refer them to the hub. Go to huboshkosh.org/make a referral and connect us. It would be great.
Thank you for watching our program. We'll see you next time.